So, I'm Arshia Soni, and I'm presenting with.
Liana Thurthale, and today we have Dr. Biju Poulose with us.
Hi, glad to be here.
Okay, so we'll get started with the questions. So, our first interview question is: how do you define schizophrenia, and what are its main characteristics?
Okay, so schizophrenia is one of the major or what we call one of the serious mental illnesses that we have. It's predominantly a an illness that where you have issues with reality testing. So people have difficulty kind of making sense of reality.
Mm.
And so it's a group of disorders really, and people can have changes in thinking. People can have changes in cognition. That means thoughts, cognitive abilities, processing speeds, and they can also have mood symptoms. But there's a lot of disorganization in terms of thoughts, mood, behavior, and yeah. So it's a group of illnesses like that.
Okay, so we know that there are like multiple types of schizophrenia, such as paranoid schizophrenia. So our next question is, what are the different types and subtypes of schizophrenia?
So you know that most mental disorders are um, diagnosed based on what we call the DSM-5. So DSM-5 is basically a diagnostic and statistical manual, and we follow that in North America. We use DSM-5. Rest of the world they use ICD-10 or the International Classification of Diseases. So these are arbitrary criteria. So earlier we used to have all these different types of schizophrenia: paranoid schizophrenia, unspecified, undifferentiated, hebephrenic, catatonic. But nowadays we don't describe it like that anymore. So we talk about schizophrenia as we say it's a continuous illness, short term, and then we have other classifications like schizoaffective. So we do not really go into describe them as just paranoid. Most of the schizophrenia, they will have some form of paranoia. So we do not describe them like that. Predominantly, symptoms of schizophrenia, we divide it into, we say positive symptoms of schizophrenia and negative symptoms of schizophrenia. And predominantly positive symptoms means things that get added on to the individual because of the illness. Like, for example, people who were not paranoid, were not suspicious, suddenly start getting suspicious. They start having what we call delusions, or they start having hallucinations, what we call perceptive or, disorders of perception, like hearing voices or seeing things. So these are things that get added on to their regular personality. So that is what we call positive symptoms. Not necessarily that they are good symptoms. They're just basically positive means things that get added on. Then they can have similarly negative symptoms. Negative symptoms means things that the disease takes away from their abilities. Like they were like, so you'll find that people who have till then been quite functioning very well, suddenly they start having problems. Right? They're not able to think as clearly. They're not able to show as much motivation. They're not able to take care of themselves as well. So a lot of negative things that happen to them. So those are what we call the negative symptoms of schizophrenia. And then, of course, they can also go on to have a lot of what we call mood symptoms, dementia, depression, anxiety, those kind of things. So we largely look at these classes of these symptoms, and we then we describe, define schizophrenia in those terms.
Okay, so we know that typically in schizophrenia, it's commonly like co-occurring with other mental health disorders, kind of as like a product of what schizophrenia may do to someone's brain. But like, how does schizophrenia differ from like other mental health disorders, such as like BPD or major depression?
So, so schizophrenia, in psychiatry, we used to define, in all disorders in the past, all disorders in psychiatry were classed into two different groups. One was called dementia precox, and the other one were called manic depressive disorders. So now we can talk about them as being affective disorders. That means disorders of mood. Affect means mood. So largely we talk about depression, anxiety, BPD or bipolar disorder. They're all disorders of mood. Whereas schizophrenia is largely disorders of thought or what we call non-affective. It's not classically a mood disorder. So we look at it more in the like thought disorders, cognitive disorders, behavioral changes, those kind of things largely. Yeah. So that is how they're different. Um, Again, these are all separate groups of disorders. Um, Schizophrenia, earlier we used to think about schizophrenia like we talked before. We used to talk about it as being one, like different, like paranoid or catatonic or hebephrenic or undifferentiated. But these disorders are based just on external presentation, like symptoms, signs and symptoms. But that necessarily does not mean they are different disorders. Okay. So we nowadays we look at it when we look at schizophrenia, do we understand it as a single disorder or a big spectrum of disorders? It's actually a spectrum, actually. But common things being changes in mood, changes, no, changes in thought, changes in cognition, changes in a person's ability to do things. Those are the things that and perceptual changes like, hallucinations. So they tend to have less of the mood symptoms. So depression, bipolar disorder, largely primary problem is changes in mood, whereas in schizophrenia we have more thought changes, hallucinations, perceptual abnormalities, and cognitive changes.
Okay. So, our next question is how schizophrenia could manifest differently in men and women. Is it the same or do they have like differences?
No, largely the same, so largely the same. Usually, not much of changes based on gender seen with schizophrenia. They generally tend to occur around the age of, late teens, early 20s. So really at the time when, individuals are beginning to get out of the house, learning, going to become more independent, things like that. Um, so yeah, so really nothing much different in terms of gender. Gender differences are not so common.
So, I know that like with mental health disorders, like external factors can also contribute to the likelihood of them occurring. So, like when stress and trauma like play a picture like in a person's life, how can that contribute to like a person or like the onset of their schizophrenia?
Yeah. So we understand now psychiatric understanding on our understanding of brain function, brain disorders, or even mental disorders, kind of constantly undergoing a change. So we understand them largely as disorders of the brain, right? And so we know that you know uh, earlier we used to think about things like, is it all genetic? Is it nature versus nurture, right? Is this so it is not really nature versus nurture. We have to understand them as a relationship between nature and nurture. It's a constant struggle. We have to look at it as think about ourselves as an animal, right? We are an animal, is it not? Right?
Mm-hmm.
We are like every other animal. We are an animal, though we don't like to call ourselves that. But if you look at it from a biological perspective, we have a body which follows rules of biology, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
what is this animal trying to do? What are you and me always trying to do? You and me are trying to adjust the best we can to our habitat,
Mm-hmm.
right? Ours is a very complex habitat, right? But that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to survive and we're trying to thrive. And so the body as a biological system has an ability to take in signals from the outside, and ultimately the biology and all the physiological systems are trying to help this animal to adjust to the best it can. But like you said, different early onset changes. So that is how many of the mental disorders are being considered as possibly occurring from uh, negative insults on the brain or the nervous system happening very early in life. So definitely childhood trauma. It could include physical illnesses. It could include, physical abuse, sexual abuse, neglect. It could include infections, right? Very early in utero infections, early in life infections. certain exposure to chemicals. Sometimes even in schizophrenia, a very interesting thing is that a lot of winter births happening in winter seem to have a higher risk of schizophrenia. So right, so we don't know why, but maybe people like in when where it's very cold, people get huddled together. Maybe the rate of infections are higher. That we don't know why, but this is an observation. So definitely environmental factors play a huge role in that in the so especially trauma. Trauma is a big one. Substances again sometimes can induce changes. So prenatal exposure to chemicals can cause changes which can predispose to schizophrenia. So when we understand schizophrenia or mental disorders as being disorders of brain function, where the brain is not able to function to its peak, then we understand that there could be problems in the way it thinks. There could be problems in the way this individual kind of appraises the situation, understands the situation. So this is how to understand them actually. Yeah. I hope
Okay.
I've answered that question. Yeah. If you have
Mhm.
questions, you
Yes.
can definitely ask. Yeah. Mhm.
Our next question is, can schizophrenia symptoms fluctuate over time?
Yes. Yeah. So schizophrenia is not, like I said, not one disorder. So we have different types. If you look at the prognosis of schizophrenia, we can roughly say that it's divided into this like 33%, three groups of 33%, right? That means there is a 33% chance that people who develop schizophrenic symptoms might, will actually be completely cured of it, will have symptoms will resolve after some time, and they may never have another episode. So like a short, brief kind of a illness like schizophrenia, like they can have. Like arbitrarily for a person to be diagnosed as having schizophrenia, they must have these symptoms for at least 6 months, with active symptoms at least for about a month, more than a month, between more than a month to more, to more than 6 months. That's when we call people have schizophrenia, right? So, but then beyond that, they could completely cure and they may have no problems. There is another 33% who will have recurring illness, like they may have episodes of a lot of illness, and then things become quieter. And largely, they do quite well. They're able to function quite well with medications, although they may have some here and there, some symptoms. But then there is another 30, 33, 35% of people for whom they'll have what we call residual schizophrenia. It used to be called earlier. That means they have some symptoms continuously and they'll need, kind of literally lifelong kind of treatment and and um, and sometimes they may need a lot of help, a lot of assistance with daily living, and they have a lot of disability basically. Yeah. So it varies. It varies on what type of. Another big factor is time to treatment. So duration of untreated psychosis, it is called. So sometimes, patients don't come for treatment early. So there can be a lot of what you call duration of untreated psychosis, DUP, like for short. And so if that is very long, that does not forebode well. So there are some places, especially not, it is not so common here, but like say places like Australia where they have, they have there the government takes care of the healthcare. It's all by the government. It's like a one payer system. So there they have what's called the early onset psychosis program where they try and treat early, the psychosis very, very aggressively early on. And that seems to have some good benefits in preventing very significant disability.
Okay. For our next question, within the media, schizophrenia has sometimes been described as like crazy or kind of like very manic, and it doesn't have the best light within certain media. So like when social stigma surrounds schizophrenia, how can it be addressed to like the public?
Yeah, so cause for any stigma is basically ignorance, right? We are emotional beings, right? We are, again, when we talk about ourselves as animals, we all like to call ourselves very rational and reasonable beings, but we are actually by default emotional beings. All right, so we respond to emotions more than reason, and so ignorance is the biggest problem with that causes stigma. People don't know, and then we are all products of a society, right? We are all born into families and we are born into ideas and ideologies, right? Think about it. We don't we think that we have our own ideas, but we actually share ideas. As a species, we have ideas. As an ethnic community, we have ideas. So there are these different ideas that we grow with. So very often what happens is we have biases in the way we look at mental illness, schizophrenia, and that's because it scares us. Why does it scare us? Because mental disorders actually challenges our ability to feel human, right? All the things that we attribute to being human is dysfunctional in mental disorders, and we don't like that. It scares us. So then we try to label, right? So the most important thing to beat stigma is literacy, understanding it. So really spreading that understanding is going to be very important. The more we know, the less we are going to be stigmatized. And then looking at it as disorders of the brain rather than attributing it as disorders of the individual, right? There's this thing we think that, oh, I am depressed. That means I'm a weak person. Not really. There's nothing to do with weakness or just personality, or, I mean, there are certain things that can contribute, increase our stress levels, but ultimately, when we look at it as saying that these are disorders of our nervous system, where just like stroke is, right? Stroke is a disorder of a nervous system. We don't try to stigmatize somebody who has a stroke, right? Because we understand stroke. We can see it. We can, oh, I do an MRI and I can see that those areas which are not functioning. But with behavior, with mood, it's very hard to just see it like that. And we think that mood and behavior is all in our control, in my control. So when we see someone acting differently, acting agitated or kind of talking to themselves, we say that this person is crazy, or we label them because we think they should have control over. But we don't recognize that this should is not automatic. It is all a function of the brain, right?
Hmm.
It's like saying, right, like for now, both of you are sitting and talking to me, right? And
Hmm.
if someone says, your parents say, where were you guys all this time? So we were having this interview with Dr. Biju, and he was telling us about all these things. And then you guys look and say, no, no, there is no such doctor at all. There's no one called Dr. Biju Paulos at all. Will you believe it?
No.
No.
Because you've seen, right? You've heard me.
Yeah.
Right? But the point is, all this is ultimately, though your eyes and ears are picking up this information, all meaning is given to me by my brain. Interpretation is the brain's job, right? All of you are sitting in a room, right? You're sitting in a room, you guys have a door. Maybe the door is locked, correct? If
Yeah.
you guys look at the door of your room, what can you describe about the door? You could, just by looking at the door, you can say that the door is so, this is the dimension of the door. It's made of wood. It is closed. If I turn the knob, then I can open the door. I shouldn't go bang on the door because, it will hurt me, right? Who's giving you all this information? Is it the eyes?
It's our brain.
The
It's like,
brain. The eye is only carrying the image of that object into the brain. And the brain is giving me all this interpretation. What happens if the brain cannot give you that interpretation or gives you some other interpretation?
well, then you
Do,
take.
do you think you will actually open the door? Do you
Yeah.
think no, you will
I mean,
will
if we don't know it, then we can't do it.
correct. And so that is important. This is the big thing in schizophrenia, in mental disorders, is that we have to understand that it is not that they're just acting like that. It is because they really, it is very hard for us to think that how can people hear sounds, right? How can people hear sounds that is not there? Do you think you can hear sounds that are not there?
Unless if our
Can
brain
you-
tells us otherwise.
Correct. Can you see things that are not there? You know? So we can. I mean, it happens all the time. See, the brain, has it ever happened to you guys while you guys are, say, traveling? You're traveling by car and you look at a signboard or a post, something is written, but some of the letters are missing. But do you guys jump to the thing? Oh, I know what that word is.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Right? We fill in the
Yeah.
blanks, right? The brain fills in blanks, right?
Hmm.
And then we are so sure that's the word. It may not be the word, but we are so sure that's the word.
Yeah.
right? It's because that's what the brain does. The brain does not like uncertainty, so the brain tries to interpret. Earlier there was a series on Netflix called Brain Games. I mean, if you guys ever get a chance to watch, you should watch it. So it's basically a program that's designed by, it is a documentary made by people who are illusionists and magicians, right? And
Mhm.
so they exploit these quirks in the brain, the way the brain operates, to amaze us. So in one of the episodes, there was on the TV monitor was just the lips of a model, right? Just the lips. And the narrator says, listen to what she says. And you hear the word go, 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 right? And then the narrator says, close your eyes. And the moment you close your eyes, you'll hear the word bow, bow. Open your eyes, go. Close your eyes, bow, right? All your whole family could be sitting and each one of you opening and closing your eyes at different times. And whenever you open your eyes, you'll hear the word go. When you close your eyes, you'll hear the word bow. Do you know what's happening there?
Your brain's
Is
like
your
taking into account like multiple signals, right? So depending on what your brain like interprets is what your brain hears, right? So like,
Right.
oh
So,
sorry, like with
yeah,
your
no,
like with the mouth, right? You're able to like read someone's lips, so you take that
correct.
into account with your interpretation, correct?
Correct. So your eye is telling the brain that the word is go, and your
Mhm.
ear is picking up the sound. So the audio that's playing is that of someone saying the word bow. So the speakers are sending out bow kind of waves, and the lips is reading, and the eye is reading the lip and saying which where the model is saying go. Now, when this happens, two alternating or conflicting signals from the same source, the brain chooses the eye over the ears and it shuts down the ear. But does it only do that or does it do something very unique? You don't
I
just,
mean,
uh-huh.
when you like pick up a signal, then your brain has to take time to like interpret it, right? So,
No, but think about it. It's not that you're thinking about the word go. You don't think about it. There is no sound called go coming from the TV.
oh,
But
you read
you
it.
hear you hear the word go.
Yeah.
You're not thinking about go, you are hearing the word. Just like you're hearing my sound, there is a physical sense of sound. But the TV is not bringing, there is no physical wave of go actually. The
Oh,
brain just generates that sound so that there is no confusion. So it's like that is, you see how the brain just changed. You're hearing a physical, you should not be able to hear, without a sound wave of go, you should not be hearing this word. But the thing is, you have no choice. You have to hear it because your brain will generate that sound. So I'm just bringing this out to show how it is that the brain can. So in disorders like schizophrenia and psychosis, that is what happens. The brain generates sounds. So for them, so like with the two of you, if no matter who tells you that you were not, there is no Dr. Biju Paulos here, and you guys were not, there is no such psychiatrist here, and they give you all the evidence, both of you are not going to believe. You said, no, we sat and we talked, and you can describe, and no matter who gives you what evidence. All the evidence may actually be pointing to that I don't exist, but it is hard for you guys to believe that. So this is what happens. My experience, what my brain tells me is my experience. That is my truth, and that is where the delusions happen. I cannot believe if the brain tells me that you are in danger, people are trying to harm you. I'm hearing voices from the wall telling me that you're being watched and you're going to be killed and you're going to be followed, you're going to be punished. Then I have to believe. So that is what happens.
okay.
Yeah, so
Okay,
stigma,
so
we're talking about stigma, right? So the main thing is to make people understand, to teach, and to accept, and to understand that this can happen to anybody. Yeah.
Yeah.
okay, so our next question is really similar to this. It's how like what gaps like still exist in our understanding of schizophrenia. So what do you think we need to do to make sure that we open up to people and know
So
more?
so a lot of gaps in so psychiatry, mental disorders, we're all still in infancy when it comes to understanding, because studying a live brain is very difficult, right? How do you study a person's brain? right? Someone who's living you. Nobody's going to allow you to kind of, dissect and measure and look at it. But it's hard. We didn't have the tools. Now we have more modern radio diagnostic tools like functional MRI, functional PET scans, right? We have things like, diffusion tensor imaging, these kind of things that are allowing us to look into functional things of the brain to measure which areas of the brain are active doing what job. So our understanding of brain function is increasing dramatically, and so we will come to know. But there is a lot of gaps. We really don't, all the earlier we were looking at everything from the outside, looking at brain, like behavior, and then trying to think about what's going on. So more and more we can measure what's actually going on, the greater we'll know about these things. But of course, yeah, from a point of view of stigma and in decreasing stigma, really getting in touch with resources that can help. There are a lot of places where you can get a lot of resources on schizophrenia. So really teaching people about mental disorders, about them being brain disorders, taking away that fear and this kind of mystery feeling, right? Because whenever there is a mystery, people misinterpret. So if you have facts, so dealing with things in facts, teaching people that this is what's happening will definitely help. And so there are a lot of resources like NAMI is a big organization, NAMI, they're a big organization. They're basically a good support organization for people, for families and people with mental disorders. So they have great websites, um, and then there are what's called the SAMHSA is basically the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Authority. So they have great resources on their websites. So basically, looking at places where you can you can get good information is going to be important.
Yeah. Okay. So our next question is like, I know that earlier you talked about it's like a lot easier to treat someone with schizophrenia if you're able to catch their symptoms early on. So when looking at like schizophrenic people, what are some of like the early warning signs for like their mental health like issues?
Yeah. So most importantly, like I said, we can look at positive symptoms, right? So classic example that you will find very classically we'll find is, like I said, it starts around 17, 18 or early 20s, right? Late teens, early 20s. So you'll find someone who has been very active, very doing well, good social life, studying well, all these things, like a regular person, right? Suddenly starts to say isolate, suddenly starts to show decreased academic performance, suddenly starts to show poor self-care, right? So these could be earlier signs of possible illness. So this is how earlier you'll have more non-specific kind of signs. But of course, they can present with outright delusions, false beliefs about things, or they can be talking to themselves, hearing voices, become pretty agitated, disorganized. So it can present like that as well. But some of the subtle signs are changes from their normal self. So things that they were doing well, suddenly they start, there's no reason, but you find that they're kind of falling off the curve. So those kind of things can be symptoms of this. Sometimes they can also present with mood changes. So anything that is out of character and seems to persist for some time can be early warning signs.
Okay, so our next question is how individuals could maintain a good mental health in their daily lives.
Big question, yeah. That's a big question, a very, very large, a very open question. So, so we can look at it from different aspects. Like I said, ultimately, one of the big things that we want to protect when you look at mental disorders per se is to be able to manage stress. So chronic stress, acute stress. Our bodies are very, very capable systems, a very, very resilient biological system. But when stress becomes chronic, long-standing, that can then cause problems in the way the nerves work. Okay, so avoiding chronic stress or learning good coping strategies is going to be important. Again, we know there is a very close relationship between the gut and the brain, right? So we talk about the gut-brain axis. So there's a lot more now. So what we eat, what we put into our bodies are also important. So that's an area which is seeing a lot more focus now because diet, also substances like substances of abuse, people drinking alcohol, things like that. So these are all considered, so like things like substance of abuse are all considered things that then affects the gut and then thereby leads to inflammation, chronic stress, problems like that. So really maintaining healthy habits, regular physical exercise is supposed to be very, very helpful in reducing chronic inflammation and promoting brain health. It actually exercise seems to help release what's called brain-derived nerve growth factor, which is supposed to be good for. It's like fertilizer or growth for your growth hormones for your brain. So those kind of things. Adequate rest. We are constantly running, so having good rest, having good social connectivity is very good. We are social beings, so sometimes loneliness, these kind of things can become a big risk factor. Um, you know, and and then, most importantly, to promote mental health is to accept that there are things that I can actually be suffering from mental illness. A lot of times, what happens is people don't like to accept that they have mental illness because it is seen as a sign of weakness and or it is seen as something to be detested completely. And so what happens, we sometimes continue and don't seek help, and that can then become a problem. So, maintaining good sleep. Sleep is absolutely the number one antidepressant. It is the number one antipsychotic. That means a lot of things get normalized if we can sleep well. Sleep is one of the greatest things that restores homeostasis in the body. A lot of healing happens by the body when we sleep. So adequate sleep is very important. Okay. I mean, if you look at it today, most of you guys will tell me if I ask you, are you an owl or are you a lark? Right? Are you guys more active at night or you guys more active in the morning? Most of you are going to tell me that we are owls, right? We are more efficient at night. But tell me, as an animal, are our bodies designed to work at night or in the daytime?
The daytime.
No doubt about it. That's how our bodies are designed. And our body design is very, very old. We are an archaic body. We have an old, old body. Okay? We don't like to think about it. Why do you think you and me eat so much of sugary stuff when we get that pastry or that ice cream? Why do we, though we know it's not so healthy for us, why do we still eat it? Why is it so hard for us to stay stop?
Probably tastes better than other foods.
It's not about taste. It's because we don't have a choice. Because our bodies are so old that the body remembers a time when there wasn't enough food. So the body is designed to take in more food when it is available, because tomorrow there may be a drought or tomorrow food may not be available.
Okay.
That
So it's
is
like
why,
like unprotective mechanism from
yeah,
the.
I mean, think about our ancestors who were like hunter-gatherers, right? Who were like, who were living over 12, 15,000 years ago, right? They were running, they didn't have any agriculture or stores or anything like that. So when they came across a tree full of ripe fruits, what did they do?
They
They
eat
eat
it.
it.
They gorged, not ate. They gorged on it. They ate so much. They were full. When you see a lion, when it has a meal, what does a lion do after eating a meal? It it finds a shade, puts its paws up, and then just relaxes. Why? Because it has overeaten. Why does it overeat? Overeats because you don't know where its next meal is coming.
Mm.
So similarly, we do that even now. Even though we are never far from a candy or a cookie at all, right? We always have a candy or a cookie,
Mm.
always available, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We never go hungry. But yet our bodies don't do it because our bodies are very old.
Mm.
Okay. So why am I saying this is that you see, it's almost like saying, I have a very old computer, right? My hardware is so old, but software updates are constantly happening. But
Oh,
after some time, they are not in sync. No matter how much of software updates we do, no matter how much of things we try, Our bodies, unless the computer itself, the hardware is able to help you, those software updates alone won't help. And then after some time, this hardware will burn out because it'll find it's not able to sync. It's too much you're asking it to do. So the best answer is for mental health is I must understand the rhythm of my body. The more I can understand the rhythm of my body and I can sync my life and my life's activities to the rhythm of the body, I will have better physical and mental health. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So next, I know that like people tend to like experience brain fog with things like social media after scrolling for a certain amount of time with like dopamine and stuff. But like overall, how does like social media and technology take a toll on a person's like mental health?
Oh yeah, that's again a very large question. It's a very broad topic,
Yeah.
and a lot more being looked into now. Um, so again, just look at it as information. And like I said, when we look at something that that we are taking in or we are kind of experiencing, we don't just experience this at when we say social media, we are just talking about it's almost like a definitive thing that we're talking about. You're talking about Facebook or you're talking Insta or whatever, like
Mhm.
Snapchat but it's not just that, right? There is an emotional piece attached to it. There is a perception that happens. Okay. So this is the big idea. The big idea is to understand that we can look at our lives in three terms, right? That's a big term we call biopsychosocial, right? That is our world. Bio means what? Biology, right? We have a
Yes.
body, right? We only have a body because we are the animal and the animal is the body, right? The
Mhm.
body is the animal, yes?
Yeah.
Yes.
Right. Everything we experience, everything we do is through the body, with the body, right? Then there is the social, right? We know about the social, right? And this social part is our habitat. That is our habitat. That is what, and it is very, very complex. It's not as simple as saying, oh, yeah, I have a family. Okay, then what? Families, relationship with each person is different. And then different classes, different things, then the financial, then the occupational. You think about all those things, and they all have meaning. And that is what happens. And then there is the psychological. That means biopsychosocial, right? How we look at it, what is my perspective, right? This is very unique, right? A glass is both half full and half empty at the same time, correct?
Oh
Yeah.
yeah.
They're both facts, is it not? If I
Yes.
say
Mhm.
your glass is half full, you'll say yes. I say your glass is half empty, you'll say yes. But how we look at something then is very subjective, right? Some people look at everything saying glass is half full, very optimistic.
Mhm.
But then that has a different effect on their mood and how they pursue things compared to someone who looks at the glass as being half empty. So psychologically, so when you interact with social media, are you just interacting with Facebook or is it leaving us an emotional tone? Is it bringing about aspirations? Is it bringing about jealousy? Is it bringing about stress? Is it bringing about peer pressure? Is it bringing about things to conform? Now, what happens is then these bring about additional stresses. Then, of course, then the amount of data that you're looking at, it can cause physical problems, right? How much screen time causes problems, right? Nowadays, if you look at it, attention span has come down. Why? Because everything needs to be fast, right? And the more
Yeah.
and more people, if you look at it, the older people can sit with they can sit with a book and read for hours sometimes. Most youngsters today can't read, can't do that. They need to be able to look at bits. Everything is bytes, right? Everything is smaller bytes. Quick, 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 ready to digest kind of thing. Right? So what happens is this is changing. So attention span is changing. And all these things will then have effects on how we function. Right? Content itself, right? What is the content of a social media post? Right? What is it that we are looking at can cause us to have changes? Right? People are worried about violence, right? A lot of times when you are exposed to a lot of these video games that are very, very graphic, so real, and it's all about killing, shooting, and things like that. Does it affect your sensitivity to our sensitivity to such events? Probably they do. So these things then shape how we look at things. So it's a very broad topic, yes. What we have to look at is, can we strike a balance? Because this perspective is important. How I perceive my environment to be, my habitat to be, is what is important. So trying to have a more measured or a more balanced view of things is going to be important, right? So yeah, social media and mental illness is a huge, huge, huge area of and it's not just one thing, right? I mean, today another big thing is that people are not forgiving. And earlier, because of there was no social media, you could make a mistake and people could forget it in time. You could think about it, but now you can't, right? It remains on the social media forever. It exists in the virtual world forever, right? So it's you have to be so much more careful. So it could be make or break what happens. So those are some of the big pressures, yeah. So and everything has an impact. We must look at it all in the form of what kind of stresses does it put on my nervous system and on my body. Yeah.
Okay, so our last question kind of like refers back to like culture and stuff.
Mhm.
And it's how do culture and background influence mental health perceptions and treatment?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think, because we are from, ethnically we're from India, so it's very classically um, we can see a difference, right? I mean, I practice as a psychiatrist in India as well, so I see how people accept us a mental disorder. In most Indian communities, you'll find they don't like to say that they ever gone to a psychiatrist. One is that they'll never go to a psychiatrist. They'll try not to. But then even when they do, they want to keep it all hush hush. But Western society, you find that they have no problem saying, yeah, I go to my psychiatrist and I talk about this. I go to a therapist. So acceptance is very important. So, and that is again part of culture, right? As I was saying, we are a social animal, and culture, being born into certain cultures, we are born into cultures, we're born into families with their own beliefs. And even before we know anything else, we come to have beliefs that are our parents or our communities. And all this can then influence accessibility to healthcare. How much we access it. It is there, so why will I go if I think nothing is wrong with me? Right? Why will I go if I think, oh, psychiatric medications are all bad? Oh, there is no cure in psychiatry, right? This is the classic thing you'll hear. Most people will say there is no cure in psychiatry. So then I ask people, and this is said by a lot of times by people who are going into medicine or people who are in medicine or other specialties. They'll say, no, yeah, I don't want to do psychiatry. I don't like psychiatry because there's no cure in psychiatry, right? And then when you ask, what is there a cure in? What does modern medicine cure? Then you suddenly realize that modern medicine doesn't cure many things. Do you think modern medicine cures a lot of things?
Not
Maybe
really.
like physical.
I mean, just infections, right? It cures
Yeah.
infections. It cures, if there are certain broken bones and things like that, we can set them straight.
But even then, there's like a limit. Like sometimes you don't feel well even afterwards.
But yeah, but the point is, chronic illnesses, there is no cure. There is management, trying to make it more easier for the individual to manage. So, and so also like diabetes, hypertension, stroke, cardiac problems, we manage it, make sure that these things don't happen again or that we minimize. And this is what we can do very well. There are certain illnesses where, like I said before, like certain patients with schizophrenia may never need treatment subsequently because their illness is well controlled and we take them off the medication and we monitor. But some people will require medicine all their life, right? Some will
So
do well and yeah.
yeah, so like kind of like in a sense, the way that medicine is progressing is the same way that like psychiatry is progressing because we found a way to like certain like I guess like when there's a place where you can cure it, you can, but like with chronic diseases and chronic mental illnesses, it's only like control, like symptomatic control, correct?
Yeah, so we have to look at it from the point. See, man uses his intelligence. What are we doing? We are very inquisitive animals, right? Very inquisitive. Now, we like to tinker with everything, right?
Yeah.
We're very inquisitive. So we try to find out, that is amazing. How does that work? We try to find that out. And then we say, then when we have a problem and say, oh, this is not working so well. Oh, I don't know why my blood sugars are going high. Then finally they found out, oh, okay, there is this insulin thing which is secreted by the pancreas. Sometimes the pancreas doesn't do a good job secreting it, or whatever is secreted, it doesn't work very well. Okay, do you think I can find something that can replace this one because this is not working? Oh, yeah, maybe we can give insulin from the outside. Oh, wow. And that seems to be doing its job. Great. Awesome. Great. Oh, kidneys does this thing. Okay. And when the kidney doesn't work, I have all these problems. It becomes fatal. Oh, can I have a machine that can actually, do the work of the kidney for now? Oh, yeah, great. We can do dialysis and we can, wash the impurities out. So this is what it is all about. Right? This is what is modern medicine is doing is what this is what it is doing. It's trying to find out how can we keep ourselves healthy, functional, minimize disability. That's what we're trying to do, and it's beautiful. It's a journey, and the more we know, the more we will be able to kind of explore and treat and understand. So psychiatry is at a very 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 infancy stage, and this is the future, right? Space and neuropsychiatry, neurology, neuropsychiatry. So this is the next frontier of medicine, really. So the more we can know about the brain, it's just fabulous system of things. And the only difficulty in knowing it is to understand is that the body, the biological system, does things by itself. Think about it, right? We are not in charge. The body, the animal is, right?
Yeah.
And it already does things. So that is why sometimes it can be very frustrating, especially for engineers, right? People who have mathematical kind of sense, they can get very upset when they deal with medicine or the body or the biological part of things because it is not completely predictable. 1 plus 1 is not equal to 2. And the reason is because the body does things by itself. I sometimes am not aware what the body is doing already, right?
Yeah.
Right? For example, if do you guys play any guitar or any stringed instruments?
I do. Yeah, I
You
played the
play.
viola.
Do you
Yeah.
have any calluses on your fingers?
Not anymore,
Okay,
but
you
when I
haven't. So you
maybe
stopped
yeah.
playing now.
No, no, no. Like when I played, because I play a lot now, but like I guess
Good.
my body's like built a resistance to calluses, you know?
Right. So the calluses form is, you don't want calluses, do you? Do you want calluses on your fingers?
No, no.
No. But the thing is, you have no choice.
Yeah. It's like a protective
That's,
mechanism, right?
yeah, that's because the body senses. Beyond our voluntary control, the body senses. And so this is why, right? The body does things by itself, and everything that we experience changes our body.
Hmm.
The body is trying to adapt because we are the animal trying to adapt to its environment. And whenever the environment changes, either outside of us or within, which is the psychological, the internal environment state, or even physical internally, right? Diseases, all these things, then the animal must take that into adaptation. And the body is trying to do that. Why? It's just trying to maintain as much function as possible. So the body is constantly changing. So if I can be aware of how my body is changing, what in the environment is changing me, I might be able to sync my life so that I am not putting it under too much stress. This is the problem. The problem is we live in a world where we think impossible is nothing. But is impossible nothing? Is it true? Is it a fact? Like if I say, oh, people believe, right? Oh, wow, it's a very good motivational statement. But when it
Yeah.
comes to the body, we must understand that this is a biological system. It has limitations.
Hmm.
Just because a rubber band stretches or lengthens when I pull it doesn't mean that we can pull it from here till infinity, right? It's going to break at a point. So
Yeah.
that is the same way. Just because our bodies are changeable, bodies are able to take a lot of things, doesn't mean that it is infinitely possible to compensate.
Yeah.
It's going to break down. So if I can sync my activities, if I can modify my environment so that I'm not pushing my body beyond a certain amount, will always be the best.
Hmm.
We need to push it to some extent, but not push it too much as well, right?
Yeah.
Finding that balance is going to be important. Good.
I think that's it. Do you want to add anything else or?
Uh, yeah, no, I mean, I think, I think more and more of you, youngsters getting interested in neuroscience is always the best thing. I've been telling people I meet that is the next frontier, really, neuroscience is. It's an exciting area of work. We are having, our engineers and our scientists are bringing up new tools that are allowing us to look into the brain and, understanding things and modifying things. So hopefully, we'll be able to do a lot more in the future. But understanding all psychiatric illnesses as disorders of the brain, just like stroke or a tumor or Huntington's disease or Parkinson's disease, it's very, very important to understand all psychiatric illnesses in those terms alone. That it is a physical illness of the brain, of the imbalance that happens in the animal's efforts to make to adapt, and certain stresses can cause it to have changes. Yeah. And to understand it like that, to simplify it rather than complicate it by saying this is punishment from God, or this is because you did something evil, or must have been a bad person. And those are all very, very those are ignorant explanations, and but can have a lot of problems for the individual. So,
Yeah.
so having compassion, empathy is important. Yeah.
Thank you
Okay.
so much.
Thank you for your time.
Great.
Thank you
Yeah,
so
you're welcome, and all the best to you girls. Yeah, do well. All the best.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye
you.
now.
Bye.